Welcome to the Upside Down Parenting Podcast from Summit Ministries. As parents, we know life can feel confusing, overwhelming, sometimes kind of upside down. And often even the way we respond to that confusion is, in Jesus' model, a little bit upside down too. So we want to invite you to join us in this conversation today where we take real life experiences and bring some application to the topics of gender, sexuality, and identity. And this is really fun. We're bringing back our co-hosts from previous episodes to just sort of have a roundtable discussion with each other about how they navigate life and some of these complicated issues. So, Katie, I want to kick it over to you. I don't think our audience has met you yet. Give everybody a brief introduction of who you are and why are you here today?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be joining you today. My name is Katie Bergford, and I am a mom to a sweet 1-year-old baby boy, and I am loving being a parent and have a lot to learn. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today as we talk about some important topics. As far as my history with Summit, I have been closely involved in Summit Student Conference for the last 6 years and served as our Colorado program manager for the last 3. So I have had hundreds of conversations with students and have seen the importance of having intentional conversations, inviting Jesus into conversations, and especially talking about hard topics like gender and identity that we are talking about today. So I'm excited to be here and help guide this conversation. We're going to hear from each of the people joining today. So Gabriel, I'm going to punt it off to you to intro yourself.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. I'm Gabriel. I am a dad of 5 and have been married to my wife for 21 years now. And I was a high school Bible teacher for quite a while and a youth pastor. So I've dealt with a lot of different ways of this gender issue that we're dealing with a lot. So that's kind of why I'm here today, hopefully to add a little bit of the conversation.
Awesome. I'm Elizabeth Stubblefield, and I am married to David, who we've been married 17 years, and he has worked with Summit on and off for over 20 years. Our family has for the last 8 years, and so we work with the summer conference and also with graduate support. But prior to that, I worked as a high school Bible teacher as well, and in women's ministry and girls ministry. So also, I'm a mom of 4 children, ranging from kindergarten through a couple of high schoolers. So I've got the span of in the thick of it right now.
And my name is Arlene Pelicane, and I'm an author. I have books like Screen Kids and Parents Rising. And my husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 3 kids. We go boy, girl, girl. We have a college graduate now, which is kind of crazy. We have my middle child is in college, and we have a junior in high school. And the top 2, the 2 older ones, have been to Summit. And so I thank you very much for being on that staff to support them because they had an amazing time in Manitou.
Awesome. Well, it is so good to be with you all today, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. It's going to be fun, and so let's jump in. First, I would love to talk about formation of our kids. So everything we do forms us, and as we press in as parents, we are playing a key role in helping form our kids. So I would love to hear from you guys. What have been some of the key things that you have focused on to be intentional with the formation of your kids and specifically with their identity? Gabriel, would you like to jump in on that?
Sure. One of the really important things that we have been intentional about in our family is we have gone through catechism with our kids. There's a lot of really good catechisms out there, and there's some really good old ones. We chose the New City Catechism that was spearheaded by Tim Keller. But going through those and giving those short summaries of important truths of the faith have been really important, even when my kids fought against it quite a bit, actually, because I'm too old for this kind of stuff sometimes and all of that. But then later on, they'll come home from youth group and say, I'm the only one that knew the answer to this sort of thing. And,
Mhm.
So, really taking the time to be intentional and bring those sorts of question and answer times has been really important for us.
I will be fully honest and say I was the parent that like would get the catechism book and then be like, this would be great. And then I would do it like once. And then I was like, well, we really didn't ever complete this book.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and my kids are old enough that when they were in elementary school, gender was not really an issue. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm sending them because my kids went to public school K through 12 in San Diego, and really K through 6th, we didn't see anything strange at all at that time.
Mm.
So, but now, if they were in kindergarten now in the exact same place that we live, I would have to be like, let's go look at good pictures, bad pictures. Let's talk
Yeah.
about what makes a boy and what makes a girl. And look, you're a boy and you're a girl, because things, are different, that you do have to talk about them. And so I think the storybooks are very helpful. And we did, even though we didn't do the formal catechism, we had many Bible stories every day, so it's just part of the rhythm, so that they are learning like, okay, this is how I am created. I have a creator, like that is huge. Like I am created by God. I have a part in God's story, all those things. And even having an understanding that sometimes life is not easy, right? If you could do all the Bible stories like Noah, not really easy building the ark and, having the world destroyed, not really easy. So that kids can understand like, oh, if I have struggles in the future, that's actually not abnormal. That's pretty normal. So when those struggles come, they're not completely thrown off guard.
Mhm.
Definitely.
One fun thing is that they do have an app now for the New City Catechism. So if you are like on the go, you can do that. And it has fun little songs for your kids to learn, which is really helpful because it's easy to have great intentions and it's sometimes hard to follow through after, the beginning. But I think another thing, echoing off what you kind of mentioned, Arlene, is reading the Bible to your kids from when they're really young. I mean, even like when mine were newborns, I was just still, if I was getting ready to teach a Bible study, I'd be like reading it out loud to them just because they don't understand it, but they're hearing my soothing voice, right? And I'm still knowing it's still getting into their hearts and wanting that just to be foundational, and whether that's with, by the Bible storybooks or even the Bible. And then as we come up in life situations, talking about it. So, for example, we were going through a difficult time as a family, and I was sitting down with one of my children, and they were just going, "Oh, why is this happening?" And so we started together rehearsing Bible stories we knew. And I was with my son; he was probably not more than 6 at the time, and we would say, "Well, God really did allow Daniel to get thrown to the lions, and Joseph really got put in that pit." And he would go back and forth with me and talk about these stories we knew, and then say, but God wasn't done writing the story yet. And so I think laying that foundation, and keeping on laying it, right? But then that's just the beginning to help them say, this isn't just a story, but how do we connect this with our life? And when life is hard, or when it's confusing, or when we say, is that a boy or is that a girl? And what's going on? And can that be fluid? Then we have something to go back to. And when you start it when they're young, it helps to just anchor that. But even if they're not young, it's never too late to start. It's harder to start when they're older, but it's never too late to start.
That's great. Thank you guys for your thoughts on that. So in this cultural moment, we are seeing that there is a huge struggle with identity, and specifically then identity with gender. So some of the data is saying that about 40% of US Gen Zs and even 30% of young Christians in the church are identifying as LGBTQ. Why do you guys think that so many young people are attracted to this label? Maybe Arlene, do you want to jump into that?
So I think we really have to ask the question, how did this spread so quickly? Right? So 20 years ago, we're not talking about this. So how in 20 years are we talking about something as fundamental as like, hey, when a baby is born, you pretty much know, like, this is a girl and this is a boy. Like, this is not a difficult subject. So how is it that we have swayed that this ideology has been able to take 30 to 40% of our kids. Like, that's crazy. So I think we have to look to what kids are getting on their phones. What are they looking at when they go on YouTube, when they go to TikTok, whatever think of it. If your child is spending, let's be nice, 4 hours a day, the average child is probably spending more like 7 to 9 hours a day, but let's just give your kid 4 hours a day on the internet. Are they seeing something about God? Yeah, maybe for 5 minutes, but the rest of the time they're being shown things that are very pro LGBTQ. Sorry, my B sounded like a P, but you know what I'm saying? So that's what they're being shown. And it's shown in a super good light. That, wow, this is how we are loving and kind, is by embracing. This is how we become who we really are, is by just acknowledging, maybe I am trans, maybe. So they're being fed this hour after hour after hour. And so to not be this way seems very strict and terrible and mean. So of course we want to be accepting. So I think the messaging has been so good. Right? Like, who doesn't want to be loving? Everybody wants to be loving. So let's be loving. So the messaging has been very good. And then the time that they have with our kids to spread this, like, wow, it's in their pocket and it's all the time. So I think the consistency of the message going in and the way it's just been crazy how quickly it has taken over.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think also, it's not simplistic in that some students may have been abused or something happens that they haven't told anyone, right? And so that it could be what draws them in out of a secret. But then for others, it's in talking to students, often sometimes they just want a place to belong. And like when I was growing up, you might say, well, they're a really athletic girl, or they're a tomboy, or something like that. But now it's like, oh, you know what? You just don't realize it. You're really trans. And then they get kind of scooped up, and then it's like, oh, well, I have my people, and I'm loved and I'm accepted. And sometimes it's as simple as that. And later they're like, oh, wait, I was just experimenting. That's not really what I want. But depending on how much they get scooped up and brainwashed, some things are irreversible, and sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah, that's
Totally.
those are really good thoughts. I think we love choice, and we love to be in control of our choices. And I've had so many conversations with students or my own kids where it's, if I'm not in control of what goes on around me or whatever, at least for this thing, I can be in control of it. And so, it's something that a lot of our culture does, where it's, I get to choose, and it's the most authentic thing I can do is choose to be what I want to be. And then everybody celebrates it, especially with this acronym. If you're looking for belonging, if you're looking for control because you feel like your home life's out of control or you can't keep up with everybody around you, this little thing you make into a big identity thing, and it is something you can control because we just say, yeah, you be you.
That's really insightful. Thank you guys for sharing about that. I'm hearing, it's like we have all these different inputs that are influencing us and influencing our kids. We know that social media is a huge influence on our kids. And Arlene, you mentioned that. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What boundaries do you have with your kids, if any, around social media, whether that's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram? What boundaries do you guys have?
I'll go first because my kids are oldest. So we knew from the beginning, we're watching, right? We're seeing this, we're reading the research. We're seeing like, okay, this is not going to go well. And now that Jonathan Haidt's book is out, Anxious Generation, a lot of people are saying, okay, this social media for kids is not going well. So for our kids, they knew from the time they're in elementary school, we'd be like, see that kid with the iPad? You're not going to have one of those. See that kid playing the video game? Not for you. So they knew all the way through. Our parents, are dinosaurs, but they love us and we have a lot of fun in our lives, but we are not getting social media, video games, or phones all the way through high school. So we did it all the way through their senior year of high school, and they would get their phones before they came to Summit. And that's kind of how it did it. And we've got 2 out of 3 done that way. The third one is totally fine with this because what they have found is, guess what? In the absence of that, you get hobbies, you get real friendship, you have peace of mind, all those things. You say, well, isn't your child left out because they don't have social media? Well, guess what? You give your kids social media and now they feel left out so much more often because they see more like, look what they're saying about me. Look, they didn't comment. Look what I wasn't invited to, where my daughters just like, they don't have it. It's just like, yeah, we don't have it and we're kind of over it. So that whole idea that, they'll be so left behind if they don't have it, we've really found that has not been the case.
Yeah, that's good. That's also bold in this day and age.
They were the only ones. Like, truly, if they're saying, Mom, we are the only one in high school in San Diego, public school without a phone. And I'm like, no, I get it. You are the only one. But but you could find workarounds. Like, they had Google Voice numbers where they could be in touch with all their sports teams, and the true friends would still be their friends, whether they video game or not. And it kind of self-selects the kind of friend you have. If your friend is like, I can't be your friend because you don't game or because you're not on Instagram, that's like, well, what kind of friend is that? So it actually is it kind of works well.
Yeah. That's encouraging to me because my oldest is only 14 and a half. So, but we've said, no social media, no phones until 17, I think is what we've said it's going to be. But we've been very, very intentional on helping them be part of that process. And so we'll do things, and we try super not to be judgy or anything, but this was a suggestion by my friend Brett, but like he would go out with his family and he would see a family that's all on their iPads or their phones at dinner. And he'd say, does it look like they're together to his kids? And we'll do that where my kids will come back from their youth group event and they'll say, these 2 kids were just right next to each other on their phones, texting each other and not listening to anything that's going on. And so we've been working with them to see that it's not actually relationship that happens. And then we've also been trying to teach our kids JOMO instead of FOMO. We want them to have the joy of missing out. Sometimes really good things happen when you're not there.
That's good.
That's a tough one to learn. The JOMO.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard. So what do you do about no phones with driving? And that's probably a question a lot of parents will ask, because that's even what I thought, because we just let our oldest have a phone with no social media on it. She can call and text, and even that has limited time and it cuts off, except for we could specify people, but between babysitting and jobs and driving, it's like, when you go places, I do want you to be able to contact me. We don't have pay phones like we used to have, right?
Yeah.
Or easy access to phones. So,
this was
that's
a real
where we kind of landed.
It's such a good question. And please, as you're listening, please know these are ideas we have. We're not judging you if you're like, oh my word, my 14-year-old has a smartphone. They all hate me. No, that's not what we're trying to say. But in terms of that, I was the same way. Like, okay, my kid is starting to drive. Like, they don't have a phone. And then my husband was so funny. He's like, okay, they're learning how to drive, and you think this is the right time to give them a phone. So now they're not only concentrating on driving, but now they're distracted because of the phone, right? And then I was like, oh yeah, I guess I get that. So I think it could be a dumb phone, right? That you have GPS, whether it's a Gab phone, whatever phone, the TrueMe phone, but it has GPS. You can text, you can call, but it doesn't have all the internet stuff. I think that's a really, really good next thing between no phone and the smartphone, is to go with a dumb phone. And
I have a phone.
An actual phone that doesn't go on the internet, but an actual phone, exactly. Yeah. And then, I have a college age, one of my son's friends, and he's got this huge flip phone. And I'm like, what is that? And he literally said, I did this because I find I'm so much more present and happy when I'm doing this. So even like for our drivers and to realize like, hey, you can be have this thing that you need just for the directions, but you don't need everything. And I think
Right.
it could have a little bit of a comeback.
Mm.
Yeah.
I hope it does. That's great. Okay, so next question. Can you each share a story of where truth and love came together well in a conversation you had about gender with your kids?
Yeah, I have one. I actually have a few, but one accumulated kind of today, actually. My kids got to go to their first ever sailing lesson today, and it was this thing put on a nonprofit, so it was free. It was all this really cool stuff, and I'm sitting there as they're introducing themselves, and the camp, or not camp, but instructor introduced herself, and she said, my pronouns are she, her, and I could see my daughter kind of just look like, what does that have to do with sailing?
Yeah.
Like, great. If you weren't, how does that fit? And I could see that came about because she told me earlier today about how I have been very intentional about sometimes you'll be in this situation where some people will say this sort of thing, or they'll want to ask you your pronouns or whatever. And she had told me before she left, and then this thing happened at the sailing. Dad, I'm always ready for it. I know that some people just need love and Jesus, and they don't yet know their place. And
Mm.
that's really cool.
That's so
So,
cool.
yeah, it was great. And she's 12, so I'm excited about that.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow.
What a
Awesome.
good conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, and so cool that happened today. What a gift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
That's
was
cool.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cool timing.
I feel like even for probably the last several years, we might be in a store and my kids would one of them would come whisper to me like, "Is that a guy or is that a girl? I think that's a guy, but
Mm.
why this,
Mhm.
or um, just commenting on whatever they were observing around them." So we would I would say, well, we'll talk about it when we leave, leave the store.
Hmm.
And then we would go ahead and discuss, like, at the appropriate age, what we could discuss at that point, and um, something along the lines of like, well, yes, that was a guy. Obviously, he's confused, or he's hurting, or he's struggling, or there's you're observing things that I'm glad you're observing, and so we need to never whisper in front of someone like that. Ask me questions, but like love them and just treat them like you would treat any other people. Care about them, learn their name, talk to them, look them in the eyes, love them. And so now we have at a couple places we frequent, there's two people in both places who have at varying various points of transitioning, and so it was almost like those were getting ready for
Hmm.
these situations that now we see frequently. And the first time you could kind of see their eyes getting big and like a little confused. Thankfully, they were like not going to say anything, and we talked and left. And now when we go, um, they're just they just talk to them and they're loving to them and they pray for them. And one of them, they're like, man, I really like that person. Like they've become a friend. Not like we hang out, although we would, but it's like, oh, how are you doing? And they talk to them
Hmm.
whenever they see them and care about them. And I said, I'm so glad that you care about this person and you've gotten to know them because, and I don't know that they would quite to the point of like loving them. They don't know them that well, but they act loving towards them and have a relationship with them. And I'm like, right, because you can't see it as the other line of the argument. You need to see them as people,
Hmm.
like we see all people, and just love them and pray for them. And um, it's been sweet to watch with one relationship in particular, just how that doing that has helped to develop it, and just to ask the Lord for an opportunity when it arises, in these situations to take the conversation further. But in the meantime, just to keep loving him and to know that they need Jesus like we all need Jesus.
Katie, I have a podcast, the Happy Home Podcast, and I have my girls edit it because that way they do it and then they have to hear all the things that my guests say. So
Yes.
one of my guests, Trisha Goyer, was talking about when her tween girl said, Mom, I'm a bisexual. I think I'm a bisexual. And Trisha was like, you're not a bisexual. And she's like, why do you say that, Mom? Because you like boys. I know you like boys. Why do you think that you're bisexual? She said, well, I think this girl is really pretty. And then they went on to talk about just because you think a girl is really pretty or even you find her attractive, like I'd like to look at this girl, it doesn't make you a bisexual. That's not what that means. You can find other people attractive. So Lucy, my daughter, heard this conversation, and it's helpful as she has like friends who are saying they're trans or maybe they're gay or they're, all these different words and things, that they think they are. And for Lucy, that was really helpful to ask questions. So what Trisha was talking about was to ask like, well, why do you think you're bisexual? What makes you, how did you come to that conclusion? And it just is a good way to start that conversation with them and it is a hard line because you're trying to teach your kids, like, you want to accept all these people as people and love them equally, but you are not trying to approve of what they do. So you're just kind of finding that line, and it's hard for all of us, but I think that idea of her learning how to ask questions out of curiosity and care, how did you come to that conclusion? And then when you have the opportunity, because I know she'll always try to drop in, well, I know that she'll say like, God loves you. And she's trying to get them to the point of, God created you and he's got a special plan for you. And eventually someday maybe to share like, I really think you're a girl, but just she's waiting. All that isn't happening in one conversation. But I think you are trying to speak the truth, but you're also speaking in love.
That's good. Thanks for sharing that. It's so helpful for me to be hearing other people talk about in action things that are happening for you and your kids. And, just as I continue to think about the years ahead for me as I raise my son, it's encouraging to think critically about that. And cool that it seems that often it's in the small moments that these conversations are happening. It's not always a big expected moment. It's like here today while your daughter was sailing, this happened. So I think for me, that makes me want to be attentive day in and day out on how to be present as a parent. I would also love to learn from some of the things that you guys have done that maybe you feel like you've messed up in. We're all human too as parents. So what are some of the things that you wish you had done differently when raising your kids, and some of the lessons you've learned from the mistakes that you've made in the past? Elizabeth, would you want to jump in on that one?
Some of them I think I'm still learning, right? Like there's a point that's like, okay, was that good? We were trying, for example, like technology is a big one. So it's like, okay, we know we're not doing social media, but when do we start teaching you good boundaries and how to text and when to text and to have conversations, not to have big conversations over text. And there's just like a learning curve to saying, okay, are we introducing it at the right time and putting the right boundaries and watching the fruit of that still? And so I think that's definitely a tricky one that I feel like, okay, we're doing okay, but then I'm like, well, maybe we shouldn't have introduced that yet. And then I'm listening to Jonathan Haidt's book and I'm like, well, actually, I think they would have gone through that process at whatever age we introduced it and shepherded them. So I think there's, in some of those things, the verdict's kind of still out for me and I'm still learning. And I think it's also so much dependent on different children, right? Because every child is different and they react and respond to the same parenting strategy totally differently. And so, I think one thing that I might have done with my daughter that I'm like, oh, that worked great, or oh, that didn't work that great. With my son, it works great, but then something else isn't. And so, I don't know that I have like a package with a pretty bow of like, this was the definite fail and definite win. But with each kid, I think there's just the conversations and the ongoing shepherding that's so much in like the moments of the day, which because it's so many moments, it means like there's plenty of moments to fail. But then there's lots more moments to catch up and to succeed. And so I think a lot of it is that daily, I don't want to say trial and error, like we're just seeing how it works out, but there is a little bit of that, like responsive, like we know some things are really clear. And then there's this room of like, how is this child responding in these conversations? And how do we need to kind of pull the reins back in? So I think one for us has been just learning that balance of texting, forget social media, just because students will have whole conversations in text that they wouldn't have in person. And so, when do you introduce that and shepherding them well in that? And so I think that's kind of a tough one, and not a clear black and white, but definitely something that I'm still figuring out, and something to kind of lean into and learn.
I think back, Katie, on the conversation I had with Dr. Jeff about just biblical worldview and gender and identity. And he talked about like the question, who am I? Instead of asking that, to ask the question, whose am I? And so I know one of the kind of regrets, and I'll explain this, was, I think figured like, okay, for my kids to know whose they are is for them to memorize the Bible, because they'll have a lot of Bible memory inside of them. And that way that'll really help them. So I was very like, I got 3 books, I have 3 kids. I got 3 journals. I picked a verse from every book of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, because I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if they knew a verse, one verse from every book of the Bible? And I started like when they were in elementary school, and we had a lot of steam at the beginning. And by the time we hit the New Testament, like we were really petering off. And then I would do like quizzes where I would give them $1 for a verse, and we'd have like fun games, and that would kind of perk it up a little bit. But when it was all said and done, I'm pretty sure we lost about John. We just tanked. So my regret, right, is you have these thoughts of like, this is what I want my kids to know, or this is what we're going to do. And then you realize like, I didn't do it. But the thing is, it's like when you shoot for the moon, right? And you don't get the moon, but you got a lot further along. Because then I realized if I never made that book, like I would have been a lot further back.
Mhm.
So these things that we are regretting, for us to realize, like, we just have to keep trying. Like, don't let that it didn't work out stop you. Just keep going. So for me, it was scripture memorization, but I am thrilled to tell you that even though they do not know every verse from that book, all 3 of my kids on their own journal, memorize the Bible on their own, pick the verses they want to memorize, and they do way better than me. And so thank the Lord, like God is working.
That's awesome.
I think if I have one regret, and my oldest is only 14 and a half, but I'm looking back and I'm seeing that there are a lot of times when the press of the world around me and the things to get done makes it so I don't just be with them enough sometimes. And
Hmm.
I can just see that they want me around more. And
Hmm.
I know that there are times where there's things we have to do, but they can be part of that process. And I mean, there's an old missions book called "When Helping Hurts," and when the kids come to help, it it hurts, but it's
Yes.
definitely something where they just enjoy being with
Hmm.
their parents. And I just, and looking back, especially with my oldest, who gets to be the guinea pig, I
Mhm.
wish that I would really make that time to be with him more, spend 15
Hmm.
minutes a day reading with him, and all that kind of stuff, and all the way down through the line. That's something
Hmm.
I wish we in our family have kind of a saying that we're trying to get going a little bit more. And it's like, look, Google's for information. Wisdom comes from relationships.
It's good.
Mhm.
And we're trying to really do that. And you don't get relationships without being with people. Somebody
Mhm.
once said, quantity time is what brings quality time. So
Hmm.
that's my regret.
So good.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing those things and being transparent in the honesty of, yeah, we're still figuring this out. We all are. And yet the wisdom that you are pressing in and day out. Yeah, thank you for that. As a final question, I would love to hear a brief answer from you guys. What do you wish every Christian parent understood about this topic?
I'll start with that one. I think there's a lot of things actually. Um, but I think the biggest thing that I think I wish people who uh go through whatever sorts of navigation they have to go through in this topic, whether it's we know someone who's this, my children are trying or thinking about going down this route, or whatever, is that you're not alone. Um,
Hmm.
and there's a lot, and don't isolate. Um, don't neglect church. Um, Church is hugely important. And then just practically, there's some really good resources out there. Dr. Jeff and Dr. Kathy's book being one of them. Glenn Stanton's book that he wrote, Secure Daughter and Secure Daughters, Confident Sons. And then there's actually some very high-level philosophers working in this area too. Thomas Bogardus, Alex Byrne from MIT are on our side and making some very good arguments that are very helpful. So,
Hmm.
I think I'd want parents to know, like, open the conversation, make it a very safe place to talk about things, and really help your kids. Like my daughter, Noelle, I was laughing because we were on an airplane and I was looking over her shoulder of what she was watching. And I told her, you watch YouTube like a man would watch YouTube, because one video, she's got like a panel of 3 guys and they're talking about like this car because she really likes cars. And then she's like watching Formula One, and then she'll be watching like an Iron Man thing. And she's just like, so I'm laughing with her. And just for our kids to understand, just because you like something that is more like boys like that or more like girls like that, that means nothing. That means you have a varied interest in those things, and that's a cool thing, you know? So I think for parents really to lean in and encourage their kids that just because you don't fit a particular stereotype, that has nothing to do with your gender, has nothing to do with whether you're a boy or a girl. And then really realizing that, you know, the 10th commandment of do not covet, you know, I think seldom do we connect that to gender, but to help our children connect, okay, when I
Hmm.
want another body, I am actually coveting. And for us all to realize that we all have sins, that, I mean, we all have it. And it's that sin nature that's like, well, I don't want what you gave me, God. I want something else. I think I can do this better than you. But as parents, if we can be that safe place, help guide our kids, but also show them, like, this is a sin when we say, I want another body. You are coveting another body. Let's pray together that you'll find
mm,
contentment and peace in the body that you're in.
Hmm. I echo what y'all said, and would just add that we have an enemy who we can't see, but we don't need to forget.
mm,
And um, the battle is really a spiritual one, right? And from the beginning in the garden, when Satan was really tempting with Adam and Eve, with saying like God's holding out on you, basically, he doesn't know what's best, he doesn't want what's best for you, and it's really the same lie twisted in a different form. And so just remembering that it is a spiritual battle. We have an enemy that we cannot see. And so we need to be on our knees praying for our kids and for our kids' friends and for our communities. And also, you know, Hebrews says that Jesus is our great high priest and that he sympathizes with our weakness in every way, that he was tempted in every way, yet without sin. And so obviously he lived on earth in a different time than us, but that verse is still true, that he was tempted in every way, yet without sin. And so we, in every issue of parenting, it's like he's given us, Second Peter says, everything we need for life and godliness in Christ. And so it's easy, you know, in these topics and many others to panic. And we need to stop and get on our knees and to know that he is the source of wisdom. He is the source of peace. He will guide us. He is our great high priest, and he's interceding on behalf of us and of our children. And so we don't want to put down our most important weapons in praying for our kids and in remembering, you know, the battle is his, and that he understands, and that he will meet us in our time of need. He promises. So, yeah.
Mhm. Katie, I want to jump in and ask you, after those hundreds of conversations you've had with students, what do you wish Christian parents knew as they go
Mm,
into this contact sport of parenting?
yeah, that's good. I think I've seen in students a craving to be known, and that many students actually don't feel known, whether that's by their parents or by their friends. anyone. And there's a whole variety of reasons for that, even like we've talked about today. Maybe it's social media, maybe it's other distractions, busyness, whatever. But many students, I think, are craving deep connection and don't feel that they have that. And so I would really, really hope that parents would sit across from their kids and get to know them. And many parents do. Like, if you're listening to this podcast, you love your kids and you want to get to know them, but maybe it's getting to know them in a new way and setting aside time for that. And getting to know a hobby that they're interested in or helping champion that. I know that something I'm loving about parenting so far is getting to know my son and surprised by his little personality. He's different than I could have dreamed up, And so I'm praying that I can maintain that type of attitude as a parent, that I'm constantly trying to get to know who is this little boy and how can I champion who God has made him to be. And yes, teach him what is right and wrong, and simultaneously let me be astounded by how God has fearfully and wonderfully created him. So, I think I would want parents to continue to press in to get to know their kids.
Mhm.
This has been my favorite episode so far. Thank you all so much for being with us and just letting me be a fly on the wall. But I hope our listeners just heard this deep conversation. It's really rich. I took away from this that, Christian parenting does not have a step-by-step formula for us to follow and then get a result. It's not a math equation. It really is life on life, discipleship, doing the best we can with what we have, being empowered by the Holy Spirit in our relationship with Jesus. God wants us to thrive in this, but he wants to walk with us in it too. So thank you all for your transparency and for having this time with us here on the Upside Down Parenting Podcast. I hope all you listeners will subscribe, like this, so that other people can get this content and then share it with people that you know. That is really the only way this content can get out into the world. So I just thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you on the next episode.